Chapter 1, Whispers in the Broken Sanctuary. The wind howled through the shattered windows of St. Augustine's Cathedral, a hulking relic on Chicago's south side, its once grand spires now jagged teeth against the bruised twilight sky. The air carried a bitter chill, laced with the faint, acrid scent of decay that clung to the abandoned pews and cracked marble floors. Lena Carver stepped cautiously over a pile of splintered wood, her breath visible in the dim light of her flashlight. At 32, she bore the weight of a restorer's life, sharp hazel eyes framed by dark circles, a faint scar tracing her left cheek from a childhood accident, and hands calloused from years of salvaging history's forgotten corners. This job was supposed to be routine: assess the damage, document the decay, and report back to the city's preservation board. But something about the cathedral's silence felt wrong, like a held breath waiting to explode. Her boots crunched on broken glass as she moved deeper into the nave, the beam of her flashlight slicing through the gloom. The stained glass, depicting saints in faded reds and golds, cast fractured patterns on the walls, but one panel near the altar stood out. Its image of a cardinal, hands clasped in prayer, seemed to shift as she passed. Lena shook her head, blaming the exhaustion from a sleepless night. The city had buzzed with rumors about St. Augustine's, a 19th century Vatican mission gone awry, a cardinal's disappearance, whispers of something sealed away. She dismissed it as urban legend until now. The altar loomed ahead, a slab of blackened stone draped in cobwebs, its surface marred by deep scratches that looked deliberate, almost ritualistic. Lena's flashlight caught a glint beneath a fallen candelabrum, and she knelt, brushing aside dust to reveal a metallic object half buried in the debris. Her fingers hesitated as she pulled it free, a chalice, its surface etched with intricate Latin inscriptions and sealed with a wax emblem bearing the Vatican's crossed keys. The metal was cold, unnaturally so, and as she turned it over, a faint golden pulse emanated from within, like a heartbeat trapped in glass. The air thickened, carrying a sickly sweet scent of myrrh that made her stomach churn. A low hum vibrated through the cathedral, rattling the remaining glass. Lena's grip tightened on the chalice as the light from her flashlight flickered, casting wild shadows that danced across the walls. She froze, ears straining, as the hum resolved into a whisper, soft, sibilant Latin words she couldn't decipher, rising from the chalice itself. Her scar prickled, a memory of pain flaring unbidden, and she stumbled back, the chalice slipping in her hands. It landed with a dull clang, the golden pulse intensifying, illuminating the altar in an otherworldly glow. From the corners of her vision, the shadows seemed to stretch, coalescing into vague, humanoid shapes that hovered just beyond the light. Heart pounding, Lena snatched the chalice and shoved it into her bag, her mind racing. This wasn't just an artifact, it was alive, or cursed, or both. The whispers grew louder, a chorus now, and she swore she heard her name woven into the chant. She backed toward the entrance, flashlight beam trembling, when a sudden gust slammed the heavy oak doors shut with a thunderous bang. The temperature plummeted, her breath fogging in thick clouds, and the stained glass cardinal's eyes seemed to follow her, glowing faintly red. Panic clawed at her throat as she fumbled with the doors, but they wouldn't budge. The whispers turned to a growl, and the shadows lunged closer, their edges sharpening into claws. In that moment, Lena realized she wasn't alone. Something or someone had been waiting for her to find the chalice. The cathedral's silence was a lie, and the relic in her bag was the key to a nightmare she couldn't yet fathom. As the golden light pulsed brighter, casting her reflection in a cracked mirror near the altar, she saw not just her terrified face but a flicker of another pale, with hollow eyes and a cardinal's mitre. The growl deepened, and the mirror shattered, spraying glass across the floor. Lena dropped to her knees, clutching her bag, the chalice's heat searing through the fabric. Whatever this was, it had just begun. The wind outside roared, shaking the cathedral's foundations, and a single Latin word echoed clearly above the chaos: damnatio, damnation. Lena's scar burned as if branded anew, and she knew, with a certainty that chilled her soul, that this relic was tied to her in ways she couldn't escape. The shadows closed in, their whispers promising judgment, and as she scrambled to her feet, the chalice's pulse synced with her racing heart, dragging her into a horror that would unravel her past and her future. Chapter 2: Heartbeat of the Shadows. Lena Carver staggered through the cathedral's nave, her breaths coming in sharp, icy bursts as the heavy oak doors remained stubbornly sealed. The chalice in her bag thrummed with a relentless rhythm, its golden light piercing through the canvas, painting the cracked marble floor in an otherworldly hue. The air was saturated with myrrh, a cloying thickness that coated her throat, while the Latin whispers, now a chaotic symphony of voices, overpowered the wind's howl outside. Her flashlight sputtered, its beam catching the shadows that pulsed in eerie sync with the relic's heartbeat. She pressed her scarred cheek against the frigid door, desperation lending her strength, but it stood immovable, as if bound by an unseen vow. A sudden splintering crack split the silence, and Lena whirled around, the chalice's heat searing her hip through the bag. The altar glowed like a malevolent sun in the distance, but the shadows had morphed, stretching into elongated, humanoid shapes with hollow, glistening eyes that pierced the gloom. Her stomach twisted as one shadow peeled away, gliding toward her with a fluid menace that defied its amorphous form. The whispers coalesced into a single, insistent chant: Carver. The sound of her name jolted her, her scar igniting with a searing pain that drew a gasp from her lips. The flashlight slipped from her grasp, rolling to cast its beam across a pew where a figure sat motionless, draped in the tattered remnants of a cardinal's robes. Its skeletal hands rested on a prayer book that wept a dark, oily liquid onto the wood. Lena's legs wobbled, but she steadied herself, gripping the bag as the chalice's pulse quickened, aligning with her racing heart. The shadow paused, tilting its head as if savoring her fear. "Who's there?" Lena's voice trembled, bouncing off the shattered stained glass. The figure offered no reply, but the whispers swelled, a torrent of Latin accusations that swirled around her, their meaning lost yet their intent clear. She retreated a step, glass crunching underfoot, and the shadow struck, its claws raking her arm. Pain flared, sharp and hot, and she stumbled, the bag sliding off her shoulder. The chalice clattered to the floor, its seal splitting wider, unleashing a crimson trickle that pooled like blood. The cathedral shuddered, dust cascading from the rafters as the golden light surged, revealing the shadow's face, a gaunt, eyeless visage with a maw stretched impossibly wide, chanting in a guttural, inhuman tone. Lena scrambled up, seizing the chalice despite its blistering heat, but the shadow melted back into the darkness, its retreat marked by a lingering chill. Her arm pulsed where it had been touched, the skin blistered and etched with faint Latin, sanguis hereditatis, blood of the inheritance. Fear clawed at her as the cathedral's roll crystallized. It was a prison, and the chalice its beating core. The cardinal's figure rose, its robes rustling like desiccated leaves, and Lena bolted toward the altar, driven by a primal urge. The pews warped, their wood groaning as they shifted to block her, alive with malevolent intent. She leaped over one, the chalice swinging wildly, and reached the altar as the cardinal's form sharpened, its hollow eyes pinning her in place. The whispers ceased, plunging the space into a deafening void, the chalice's pulse thundering in her ears. A vision ripped through her mind. 19th century Chicago, a cardinal in crimson overseeing a pyre, a woman with Lena's hazel eyes shrieking as flames devoured her. The image faded, leaving her breathless, the chalice's heat branding her palms. The cardinal's voice, dry as ancient parchment, rasped from the shadows, "Your blood cannot flee its fate." The words burrowed into her, the walls seeming to contract, the stained glass saints' faces contorting into leering masks. Lena sank to her knees, the chalice slipping free, its light dimming as the shadows encroached. She clawed at the altar, her fingers finding a concealed panel that slid open, revealing a Vatican-sealed scroll. Her hands shook as she unrolled it, the parchment disintegrating to expose a sketch of the chalice and her family name, Carver. The truth struck her like lightning. The relic wasn't merely cursed, it was a legacy of damnation passed through her bloodline. The cardinal loomed, its skeletal hands outstretched, and Lena thrust the chalice against the scroll. The golden light erupted, incinerating the parchment to ash, and the shadows shrieked, recoiling in agony. But the reprieve was fleeting. The chalice's pulse resumed, fiercer now, and the inscription on her arm glowed, spidering across her skin like corrupted veins. The cathedral doors groaned open behind her, a frigid wind rushing in, carrying the cardinal's mocking laughter. It promised this was merely the prelude. Lena stumbled outside, the chalice pressed to her chest, the south side skyline jagged against a crimson-streaked sky. The whispers trailed her, a relentless murmur in her mind, and she felt the relic's heartbeat merge with her own. Whatever the cardinal had imprisoned, it had claimed her, and its awakening had only just begun. If you felt a chill just reading this, share your spookiest cathedral story below. Chapter 3, Blood from the Seal. The frigid wind bit at Lena Carver's face as she stumbled out of St. Augustine's Cathedral, the chalice's heat a stark contrast against her chilled palms. The south side skyline loomed under a sky streaked with crimson, the city's distant hum drowned by the relentless Latin whispers echoing in her mind. She clutched the bag tighter, its contents pulsing like a second heartbeat, the inscription on her arm sanguis hereditatis glowing faintly under her sleeve. The cathedral doors slammed shut behind her with a hollow thud, the cardinal's laughter fading into a sinister silence. Dawn was hours away, and the deserted streets offered no solace, only the occasional flicker of a street lamp casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to watch her. Lena ducked into an alley, her breath fogging in the cold, and leaned against a brick wall, pulling the chalice from her bag. Its surface was marred with fresh cracks, the Vatican seal fractured, and as she tilted it, a thick, crimson liquid oozed from the breach, dripping onto the pavement with a sizzle. The scent of myrrh intensified, mingling with an iron tang that made her gag. She wiped her gloved hands on her jacket, but the stain spread, seeping into the leather like a living thing. The whispers grew louder, a chant that vibrated through her skull, and she dropped the chalice, watching in horror as the blood pooled, forming delicate, rune-like patterns that pulsed with golden light. A sharp pain lanced through her arm where the inscription glowed, and she yanked up her sleeve to see the Latin words writhing, as if rewriting themselves. Her vision blurred, and a memory not her own flooded her mind, a dimly lit Vatican chamber, a cardinal in crimson robe sealing the chalice with wax, his voice trembling as he muttered prayers over a woman's screams. The woman's face was hers, her hazel eyes wide with terror as flames licked at her feet. The vision snapped away, leaving Lena gasping, her hands shaking as she retrieved the chalice. The blood on the ground evaporated, but the runes lingered, etched into the asphalt like a brand. She staggered to her feet, the chalice's weight pulling at her, and noticed a rusted dumpster nearby. Desperate to contain the relic, she pried it open, the screech of metal grating her nerves, and shoved the chalice inside, slamming the lid shut. The pulsing stopped momentarily, but a low groan emanated from within, followed by a trickle of crimson seeping through the seams. Lena backed away, her heart hammering, when a figure emerged from the shadows, a gaunt man in a tattered coat, his eyes milky white, chanting the same Latin she'd heard in the cathedral. His hands reached for her, fingers twisted like claws, and she bolted, the alley narrowing as if closing in. The streets twisted unnaturally, buildings leaning inward, their windows reflecting not her fleeing form but the cardinal's hollow gaze. Lena's lungs burned as she ran, the chalice's pulse resuming, now a drum beat in her chest. She ducked into an abandoned storefront, its glass door shattered, and barricaded it with a rusted shelf. The man's chants grew closer, punctuated by a wet, dragging sound, and she pressed herself against the wall, the chalice's heat searing through the dumpster's metal in her mind's eye. A ledger half-burned and waterlogged lay on the floor, its pages fluttering open to reveal a Vatican crest and a list of names, including Carver with a note, "Heresy sealed in blood." Her fingers traced the ink, and the page ignited, flames licking upward without consuming the paper, revealing a sketch of the chalice and a warning, "Break the seal, awaken the damned." The chanting outside ceased, replaced by a guttural growl, and the storefront's windows shattered inward, glass raining around her. Lena grabbed the ledger, the chalice's pull dragging her back toward the cathedral, and kicked the shelf aside, racing into the night. The gaunt man lunged, his claws grazing her ankle, leaving a burning welt, but she broke free, the ledger clutched to her chest. As she neared the cathedral, the sky darkened, clouds swirling into a vortex above, and the chalice's pulse synced with a distant church bell tolling midnight. The inscription on her arm spread, tendrils of light snaking toward her heart, and she knew the seal's breach had unleashed something unstoppable. The ledger's pages flapped wildly, revealing a final entry, "The blood calls its own." Lena's scream was swallowed by the wind as the cathedral doors creaked open, inviting her back into the nightmare. If this chase sent shivers down your spine, hit that subscribe button to join Lena's journey. Chapter 4, The Cardinal's Ghostly Gaze. The cathedral doors gaped open before Lena Carver, their creak a guttural summons that drowned the midnight tolling of a distant church bell. The south side was shrouded in an unnatural darkness, clouds above swirling with crimson veins, as if the sky itself bled. The ledger trembled in her hands, its pages rustling with secrets, while the chalice's pulse hammered in her bag, its heat a relentless burn against her side. The welt on her ankle from the gaunt man's claw ached, the Latin inscription Sanguis Hereditatis now a lattice of glowing tendrils climbing her arm. She hesitated, the open doors a maw of uncertainty, but an icy gust seized her, dragging her inside. The nave was a cavern of shadows, the altar's golden light pulsing like a wounded star. Lena's boots slid on the crimson-slicked marble, and she steadied herself against a pew, its wood creaking ominously. The ledger's pages flipped, revealing a faded sketch of a cardinal with hollowed eyes and a note in shaky Latin, Custodem Animarum, guardian of souls. A chill sank into her bones as frost crawled up the walls, and a spectral figure materialized at the altar, a cardinal in crimson robes, his mitre askew, his decayed face lit by ember-like eyes. "You defile sacred ground," his voice rasped, a chorus of dry, overlapping tones that reverberated through the nave. His skeletal hands gestured toward the chalice, and Lena's bag jolted, the relic straining to obey. She gripped it tighter, her scarred cheek prickling under his gaze. The whispers surged, a choir intoning her name, while the stained glass saints' faces warped, their painted eyes tracking her with malice. Swallowing her fear, she demanded, "What do you want?" The cardinal glided forward, his robes trailing shadow tendrils, the air thickening with myrrh until it choked her. "Your blood shattered the seal," he intoned, his ember eyes narrowing. "Now it must atone." The chalice pulsed wildly, its heat searing through the bag, and Lena dropped it, the relic rolling toward the altar. The nave darkened, the golden light shrinking, and cloaked figures emerged from the shadows, their faces veiled, chanting with the cardinal in a rising crescendo. Lena lunged for the chalice, her fingers grazing it as a spectral hand seized her wrist. The touch was a freezing brand, and she wrenched free, clutching the relic. The cardinal's gaze deepened, and the cathedral quaked, pews splintering as if struck by wrath. A vision crashed into her, a Vatican dungeon, the cardinal sealing the chalice over her ancestors' screams, a blade falling as flames rose. The image vanished, leaving her breathless, the chalice's heat fusing with the pain in her arm. She staggered back, the ledger slipping, its pages scattering like fallen leaves. One landed near her, its ink glowing, the guardian seeks its vessel. The cardinal's laughter rolled like thunder, and the spectral figures closed in, their chants of fevered hymn. Lena swung the chalice, its light flaring to dispel one figure into smoke, but exhaustion weighed her down. The cardinal's hand lashed out, gripping her throat with an intangible force, lifting her off the ground. His hold was suffocating, her feet dangling above the blood-streaked floor. "Your blood is the key," he hissed, his eyes boring into hers. The inscription flared, tendrils piercing her chest, tugging at her soul. The chalice floated between them, its seal cracking, emitting a wail that shattered the stained glass into a glittering storm. With a desperate heave, Lena kicked the altar, dislodging a hidden panel that revealed a shard of blessed iron. She snatched it, plunging it into the chalice space. The relic shrieked, the sound tearing the cardinal's grip away, his form flickering like a dying flame. The spectral figures wailed, dissolving into the darkness, but the chalice's light faded, its pulse faltering. Lena collapsed, the iron shard lodged in place, her arm throbbing as the inscriptions spread slowed. The cathedral fell silent, the cardinal's form waning, but his voice lingered, "The seal is rent. The guardian stirs." The doors slammed shut, imprisoning her, and the chalice's faint pulse resumed, a harbinger of dread. Clutching the ledger page, Lena's mind raced with its warning, wondering if the guardian was the cardinal or something darker within her. The night deepened outside, the city unaware of the horror awakening. If you're hooked by this twist, give this video a like to support the story. Chapter 5, Nightmares of the Holy Fire. The cathedral's silence pressed against Lena Carver like a physical weight, the slammed doors sealing her in a tomb of shadow and myrrh. The blessed iron shard jutted from the chalice, its faint golden pulse now a stuttering heartbeat, while the ledger page in her hand trembled with glowing ink. The guardian seeks its vessel. Her arm throbbed, the Sanguis Hereditatis inscription spreading like molten veins toward her heart, each pulse a reminder of the cardinal's threat. Outside, the south side was lost to the crimson-streaked night, its usual clamor muted as if the city held its breath. It was 2:47 p.m. on Tuesday, October 7, 2025, but inside this forsaken place, time felt suspended, warped by the relic's curse. Lena slumped against the altar, the cold stone biting through her jacket, and tried to steady her breathing. The spectral figures were gone, their chants replaced by a low, resonant hum that vibrated through the floor. She pulled the chalice closer, its heat searing her palms, and noticed the seal had cracked further, revealing a glint of something inside, perhaps the saint's blood the cardinal had spoken of. Her crew would arrive soon to check on her progress, but the thought of involving them filled her with dread. The vision of her ancestors' execution lingered, a ghost in her mind, and she wondered if they, too, would become targets. A sudden scream pierced the hum, echoing from the shadows near the choir loft. Lena's head snapped up, her hazel eyes scanning the darkness, and she grabbed the ledger page, its sketch of the cardinal seeming to shift, his hollow gaze now fixed on her. The scream came again, closer, and she recognized it, her co-worker, Jamal Hayes, his voice raw with terror. She stumbled toward the sound, the chalice swinging in her grip, its light casting wild patterns on the walls. The loft's ladder creaked under her weight, and as she climbed, the air grew thick with smoke, not the acrid burn of fire, but a holy incense that stung her eyes. At the top, Jamal knelt, his dark skin glistening with sweat, his hands clawing at his face as if to rip away a vision. His eyes were wide, unseeing, and he muttered, "The fire, the trial, it's coming for us." Lena dropped beside him, shaking his shoulders, but he didn't respond, his gaze locked on something beyond her. The chalice pulsed, and the loft darkened, the smoke coalescing into a swirling vortex. Within it, flames roared to life, not consuming the wood but projecting a scene, a Vatican courtroom, robed figures chanting, and a woman Lena's double bound to a stake as flames licked her skin. The cardinal presided, his ember eyes gleaming, sealing the chalice with her blood. Jamal's scream turned to a gurgle, and his hands fell, revealing burns across his cheeks, marks that mirrored the vision's fire. Lena's stomach churned as the smoke thickened, the heat pressing against her, and she realized this wasn't a memory, it was a warning. The chalice's light flared, and the vortex shifted, showing her crew 3 others stumbling through the cathedral below, their faces contorted in identical nightmares. The cardinal's laughter echoed, a sound that vibrated the loft's beams, and the inscription on her arm burned, tendrils branching toward her chest. She yanked Jamal to his feet, his weight dragging her down, and half carried him to the ladder. The smoke followed, tendrils wrapping around her ankles, whispering her name in Latin. The chalice slipped, rolling toward the vortex, and Lena dove, catching it just as the flames surged, singeing her jacket. The vortex collapsed, leaving the loft silent, but Jamal's burns deepened, his breath shallow. She tore a strip from her sleeve, wrapping his face, and descended, the chalice's heat a lifeline in her hands. Downstairs, her crew Sarah, Mike, and Elena stumbled into view, their eyes hollow, muttering about fire and judgment. Lena shouted, her voice cracking, "Get out! It's not safe," but the cathedral doors remained sealed, the cardinal's presence a weight in the air. The ledger page glowed brighter, revealing a new line, "The fire purges the unworthy." Panic seized her as the hum intensified, and the stained glass shattered, raining shards that melted into crimson droplets on the floor. Lena rallied her team, dragging them toward a side chapel, its door ajar. Inside, a font of holy water shimmered, and she plunged the chalice into it, the liquid hissing as steam rose. The pulse slowed, the inscriptions spread halting, but the water turned red, reflecting the cardinal's face instead of hers. His voice boomed, "The blood cannot be cleansed," and the chapel trembled, pews toppling. Jamal convulsed, his burns flaring, and Lena held him, the chalice's heat merging with her fear. The night outside roared, a blizzard brewing, and the cathedral's hum promised more horrors. Lena knew the fire wasn't just a vision, it was a curse spreading through her crew, and she was its source. If this fiery nightmare intrigued you, share it with a friend who loves a good scare. Chapter 6, The Prophet's Chilling Warning. The chapel's air hung heavy with the metallic tang of the red-tinged holy water, its surface still reflecting the cardinal's mocking face as Lena Carver steadied Jamal's trembling form. It was 2:48 p.m. on Tuesday, October 7, 2025, but the cathedral's interior defied time, cloaked in a perpetual twilight where shadows danced to the chalice's faltering pulse. The inscription on her arm Sanguis Hereditatis throbbed, its glowing tendrils now a web across her chest, each beat sinking with the relic's heat in her hands. Sarah, Mike, and Elena huddled nearby, their faces etched with the hollow terror of their shared nightmare, the air thick with the fading scent of holy fire and myrrh. Lena wiped sweat from her brow, the blessed iron shard glinting in the chalice's dim light, and scanned the chapel for an escape. The side door they'd entered through was gone, replaced by a seamless wall of cracked plaster, as if the cathedral had rearranged itself to trap them. Jamal groaned, his burns worsening, and she pressed a damp cloth to his face, her mind racing. The ledger page, clutched in her free hand, glowed with a new warning, "The fire purges the unworthy," but a faint postscript caught her eye, "Seek the prophet's counsel." The words pulsed, urging her onward. A creak sounded from the shadows, and an elderly figure shuffled into the chapel. Father Elias, the historian who'd overseen St. Augustine's preservation efforts. His white hair was thinning, his stooped frame draped in a threadbare cassock, and his rheumy eyes held a flicker of recognition as they met Lena's. "You've found it," he rasped, his voice a gravelly whisper, pointing a gnarled finger at the chalice. "The relic of damnation." Lena tensed, her scar prickling, but something in his tone, part warning, part resignation, kept her from bolting. "What do you know?" she demanded, stepping forward, the chalice's weight anchoring her. Father Elias sank onto a pew, his hands trembling as he pulled a worn leather satchel from beneath his robes. "In 1873, he began, a cardinal came to Chicago with a secret mission from the Vatican. He carried that chalice, sealed with the blood of a heretic, your ancestor, Lena Carver. She was accused of sorcery, her execution a public spectacle, but the cardinal believed her blood held power. He bound it in the relic, hoping to contain the curse, but it was a fool's gambit. The chapel dimmed, the chalice's pulse quickening, and Lena's vision blurred with another memory, not her own, a pyre blazing, her ancestors' screams mingling with the cardinal's Latin prayers. The image faded, leaving her dizzy, and Father Elias continued, "The Vatican sent me to watch this place, to ensure the seal held. But you've broken it, and now the guardian stirs." His eyes darted to the chalice, then to her arm, where the inscription glowed brighter. "Your bloodline is the key. Its curse will claim you all unless you reseal it." A low growl rumbled through the walls, and the stained glass shattered inward, raining crimson droplets that hissed on the floor. Lena's crew flinched, Jamal whimpering, as spectral figures cloaked in tattered vestments emerged from the shadows, their chants a dissonant hymn. Father Elias fumbled in his satchel, producing a vial of consecrated oil and a cracked prayer book. "This might slow them," he muttered, splashing the oil toward the figures. The liquid sizzled, driving them back, but their numbers grew, their hollow eyes fixed on Lena. She thrust the chalice toward Father Elias. "How do I reseal it?" she asked, her voice breaking. He shook his head, his hands shaking as he opened the prayer book. "The ritual requires a sacrifice, blood of the same line, willingly given. Your ancestors' death wasn't enough, the cardinal's seal was flawed." The implication hung heavy, and Lena's stomach churned as the inscription burned, tendrils piercing her ribs. The spectral figures lunged, their claws raking the air, and Father Elias shoved her behind him, chanting a halting prayer. The chapel quaked, pews toppling as the cardinal's laughter boomed, his form materializing at the altar. "The prophet lies," he sneered, his ember eyes blazing. "The blood must flow to awaken, not bind." The chalice pulsed violently, lifting from Lena's hands, and the spectral figures seized Father Elias, dragging him toward the altar. His screams cut off as the chalice hovered above him, its seal splitting wide, releasing a torrent of crimson that engulfed him. The old man dissolved into shadow, his prayer book falling open to a blank page that glowed with a single word: "Repent." Lena fell back, the chalice crashing to the floor, its light dimming as the spectral figures retreated, their chants fading. Her crew stared, frozen, as the inscription on her arm slowed, but the cardinal's voice lingered: "Your sacrifice is next." The chapel door reappeared, ajar, but the air crackled with a new threat. Lena grabbed the prayer book, its blank page a taunting riddle, and rallied her team, the chalice's heat a burden she couldn't shed. If this twist left you speechless, consider sharing your thoughts in the comments. Chapter 7, awakening of the blood curse. The chapel door creaked ajar, a sliver of the crimson-streaked night spilling into the suffocating gloom of St. Augustine's Cathedral, where Lena Carver stood frozen, the chalice's dim pulse a leaden weight in her hands. It was 2:50 p.m. on Tuesday, October 7, 2025, yet the cathedral's warped time held her in a relentless dusk, the air thick with the fading scent of consecrated oil and the iron tang of Father Elias's vanished blood. The prayer book's blank page etched with repent crackled in her grip, while the Sanguis Hereditatis inscription on her arm burned, its glowing tendrils now a lattice across her chest, pulsing in sync with the relic. Sarah, Mike, and Elena huddled nearby, their faces gaunt from the nightmare's fire, while Jamal lay unconscious, his burns festering with an unnatural sheen. Lena's breath hitched as she stared at the altar, where the cardinal's laughter still lingered, a ghostly echo promising her sacrifice. The chalice seal, cracked and weeping crimson, seemed to pulse with a life of its own, and she felt a pull not just physical, but a deep, ancestral tug at her soul. She shoved the prayer book into her jacket, its weight a grim reminder of Elias's fate, and turned to her crew. "We need to move," she rasped, her voice raw. But as she stepped toward the door, the walls shuddered, plaster raining down, and the cathedral's interior twisted, the pews rearranging into a labyrinthine maze. A low moan rose from the shadows, and the stained glass, now a mosaic of shattered saints, glowed with an eerie red light. Lena's vision swam, and a memory not her own surged forth, a 19th century Chicago street, her ancestor Miriam Carver dragged in chains toward a pyre, her hazel eyes pleading as a cardinal sealed the chalice with her blood, his voice intoning a curse. The image faded, leaving a bitter taste, and the inscription on her arm flared, tendrils piercing her ribs with a searing pain. The maze shifted again, walls closing in, and a figure emerged, Miriam, or her ghost, her face a mirror of Lena's, her voice a whisper, "The blood awakens." The crew stumbled behind her, Mike muttering prayers, Sarah clutching Elena, who whimpered as the air grew colder. Lena gripped the chalice, its heat a lifeline, and pushed forward, the maze's turns leading her deeper into the cathedral's heart. The moan grew into a chorus, and the walls oozed crimson, the liquid pooling at her feet, warm and sticky. She slipped, the chalice rolling from her grasp, and Miriam's ghost lunged, her ethereal hands clawing at Lena's arm. The inscription burned brighter, tendrils merging with the ghost's touch, and Lena screamed as a flood of memories assaulted her. Miriam's trial, her defiance, the cardinal's betrayal, and the curse etched into their bloodline. She wrestled free, snatching the chalice, its light flaring to dispel the ghost, but Miriam's laughter lingered, blending with the cardinal's. The maze opened into a transept, its ceiling lost in shadow, and a stone table stood at its center, carved with Latin runes that matched her inscription. The crew caught up, their faces pale, and Jamal stirred, his eyes opening to reveal a fleeting glow mirroring the chalice's pulse. "She's in me," he croaked, his voice not his own, and his burns pulsed, spreading across his neck. Lena's heart sank as she realized the curse wasn't just hers, it was spreading. She placed the chalice on the table, its seal cracking further, releasing a thin wail that shook the transept. The runes glowed, and the table split, revealing a hidden compartment containing a rusted key and a parchment fragment. The key's handle bore the Carver crest, and the parchment read, "The blood must claim its own to rise." The cardinal's form materialized, his ember eyes blazing, and the spectral figures returned, their chants a deafening roar. "You cannot flee your heritage," the cardinal intoned, his hand reaching for the chalice. Lena snatched the key, jamming it into the table's lock, and twisted. The transept quaked, the compartment collapsing, and the chalice sank into a void, its light fading. But the inscription on her arm surged, tendrils piercing her heart, and Jamal convulsed, his burns flaring as the ghost of Miriam rose from him, her eyes locked on Lena. "Join me," she whispered, her voice a siren's call. The crew screamed, the cardinal's laughter merging with Miriam's, and the transept walls bled, the crimson pooling into a vortex. Lena clutched the parchment, the key still in the lock, and knew the curse had awakened fully. Her bloodline's damnation was no longer contained. The vortex spiraled toward her, promising absorption, and the cathedral's hum promised more horrors to come. If this family curse has you on edge, why not give it a share to see what others think? Chapter 8, Vanished into the Sacred Void. The transept's vortex spiraled with a hunger that sucked the air from Lena Carver's lungs, the crimson tide lapping at her boots as the cathedral's hum deepened into a predatory growl. It was 2:51 p.m. on Tuesday, October 7, 2025, in the warped reality of St. Augustine's, where time bent under the chalice's fading pulse. The rusted key remained lodged in the stone table's lock, its Carver crest glowing faintly, while the parchment fragment in her hand trembled with the cryptic warning, "The blood must claim its own to rise." The Sanguis Hereditatis inscription seared her chest, its tendrils now a glowing web threatening her heart, as Miriam's ghost hovered, her mirror image eyes boring into Lena's soul. Sarah, Mike, and Elena cowered, their faces etched with terror, while Jamal convulsed on the floor, his burns pulsing with an otherworldly light. Lena's knees buckled under the vortex's pull, the chalice's absence leaving a void that gnawed at her. Miriam's whisper, "Join me," echoed, a siren's lure laced with her ancestors' pain, and Lena felt her will fraying, the curse's weight dragging her toward the void. The cardinal's laughter boomed, his spectral form coalescing at the transept's edge, his ember eyes gleaming with triumph. "The blood awakens," he intoned, his voice a thunderclap that rattled the bleeding walls. The spectral figures returned, their tattered vestments swirling in the vortex, their chants a dissonant wail that drowned out her crew's cries. Jamal's body arched, his eyes rolling back as Miriam's ghost flowed into him, his burns flaring into a network of crimson veins. He rose, no longer himself, his voice a duet with Miriam's, "The vessel is prepared." Lena stumbled back, the key tearing from the lock as the table crumbled, revealing a chasm where the chalice had sunk. The vortex surged, dragging Sarah toward the edge, her scream cut short as she vanished into the void, leaving only a ripple of crimson mist. Mike lunged to save her, but Elena held him back, sobbing, "She's gone." The cardinal gestured, and the chasm widened, its depths a maw of shifting shadows. Lena clutched the parchment, its glow intensifying, and a fragment of memory surfaced, Miriam hiding a relic shard before her execution, a piece of the chalice seal. The realization struck, the key might unlock more than a compartment, it could sever the curse. She jammed the key into a rune-carved slot on the table's remains, twisting with all her strength. The transept shuddered, the vortex faltering, and a hidden panel slid open, revealing a jagged shard of wax and metal, the missing seal piece. Miriam and Jamal lunged, his clawed hands raking Lena's arm, deepening the inscription's glow. She swung the shard, its edge slicing his shoulder, and he recoiled, his form flickering. The cardinal's laughter ceased, replaced by a snarl, and the spectral figures closed in, their claws tearing at the air. Lena pressed the shard against the chalice's imprint on the table, its runes aligning with the resonant hum. The vortex roared, pulling Mike and Elena toward the chasm, their screams blending with the chants, but the shard glowed, sealing the breach with a flash of golden light. The light faded, the chasm sealing, but the cost was steep. Mike and Elena were gone, their echoes swallowed by the void. Jamal collapsed, Miriam's presence ebbing, his burns dimming, though his breath rasped with a lingering curse. The cardinal's form wavered, his voice a fading growl, "The blood endures." The transept stilled, the walls ceasing their bleed, but the chalice's pulse echoed from the sealed chasm, a promise of resurgence. Lena sank to her knees, the shard in one hand, the key in the other, the inscription still burning, now a permanent mark of her lineage. The cathedral's silence returned, but it was a hollow victory. The crew was decimated, and the curse lingered, its tendrils rooted in her blood. The prayer book's repent glowed anew, a taunt or a guide, and Lena knew the guardian, whether cardinal or something deeper, wasn't defeated. The night outside deepened, the blizzard's howl a distant threat, and she felt the chalice's call, a whisper in her veins, urging her to descend. If this loss hit you hard, consider liking the video to show your support. Chapter 9, Secrets of the Forbidden Vault. The transept lay in a shattered hush, the sealed chasm a scar in the stone table where the chalice had vanished, its pulse now a distant murmur vibrating through Lena Carver's bones. It was 2:52 p.m. on Tuesday, October 7, 2025, in the warped confines of St. Augustine's Cathedral, where the blizzard's howl outside clashed with the cathedral's oppressive stillness. The Sanguis Hereditatis inscription glowed across her chest, its tendrils a relentless web tightening with each breath, the rusted key and wax metal shard clutched in her trembling hands. Jamal lay slumped, his burns dimmed but his breathing shallow, a ghost of Miriam's presence lingering in his glazed eyes. The prayer book's repent page pulsed faintly, a beacon in the crimson-streaked gloom, while the cardinal's parting growl, "The blood endures," echoed in her mind. Lena staggered to her feet, the loss of Sarah, Mike, and Elena a raw wound, their screams still reverberating in the void's wake. The transept's walls, once bleeding, now dripped with a viscous residue that hardened into crystalline formations, refracting the dim light into a kaleidoscope of red and gold. She pocketed the shard and key, her hazel eyes scanning for an exit, when a hidden panel in the wall, unnoticed until now, clicked open, its edges glowing with the same runes as the inscription. The cathedral seemed to shift, guiding her, and she approached, the prayer book trembling in her jacket as if drawn to the discovery. Inside the panel was a narrow staircase descending into darkness, the air growing colder with each step, carrying a faint metallic hum. Lena descended, the shard's edge cutting into her palm, a reminder of the cost already paid. The stairs opened into a vault, its walls lined with Vatican-sealed archives, leather-bound tomes and iron-bound chests, their surfaces etched with Latin prayers and Carver crests. A single lantern flickered, casting long shadows that writhed like the spectral figures, and at the vault's center stood a pedestal, its top a hollowed basin filled with congealed blood that shimmered with golden flecks. Lena's scar burned as she approached, the inscription flaring, and a vision seized her, a 19th century ritual, the cardinal presiding over Miriam's execution, her blood drained into the chalice as he intoned a binding spell, then secreted here to hide the heresy. The memory faded, leaving her gasping, and the vault's hum intensified, the blood in the basin rippling. She opened a chest, its lock yielding to the key, and found journals, pages yellowed and brittle, detailing the cardinal's mission, to contain Miriam's power, believed to be a conduit for a guardian demon, by sealing it in her blood. One entry stopped her cold: the Carver line is the vessel, the seal's breach will summon the true guardian. A clatter echoed, and Lena spun, the shard raised, as a figure emerged from the shadows, Father Elias, or what remained of him. His form was translucent, his cassock tattered, his eyes hollow pits of shadow. "You've opened the vault," he rasped, his voice an echo of his final scream. "The guardian stirs within you." Lena backed away, the journal slipping, but Elias's ghost floated closer, his hands outstretched. "The blood must be purged, or it claims all." The basin's blood surged, splashing onto the floor, and the vault trembled, the archives rattling. Lena thrust the shard into the basin, its golden flecks hissing as the metal met the liquid, and a scream not human erupted from the depths. The inscription on her arm burned, tendrils retracting slightly, and Elias's form flickered, his voice fading, the ritual, incomplete. The vault ceiling cracked, rubble falling, and a shadow coalesced above the basin, a towering figure with ember eyes and tattered wings, its presence a suffocating weight. Lena grabbed the journals, the shard still in the basin, and ran for the stairs as the guardian's roar shook the vault. The archives ignited, flames licking the walls, but the fire was cold, a spectral blaze that chased her upward. She emerged into the transept, the cathedral quaking, Jamal stirring with a groan. The guardian's shadow loomed below, its wings spreading, and the inscription pulsed, a bridge between her and the entity. The prayer book's page glowed brighter, hinting at a ritual, but the vault's collapse sealed her path back. The blizzard raged outside, the cathedral a prison, and Lena knew the guardian was no longer contained, it was waking through her blood. If this vault dive sent chills through you, why not hit that share button to spread the fear? Chapter 10, Judgment in the Saint's Blood. The transept trembled under the weight of the guardian's shadow, its tattered wings brushing the vault's collapsing ceiling as Lena Carver stumbled back, the journals clutched to her chest. It was 2:53 p.m. on Tuesday, October 7, 2025, in the distorted timeline of St. Augustine's Cathedral, where the blizzard's howl outside clashed with the vault's fading hum. The Sanguis Hereditatis inscription blazed across her chest, its tendrils a fiery web pulsing in rhythm with the guardian's distant roar, the rusted key and wax metal shard heavy in her pockets. Jamal groaned faintly, his burns a dull glow, while the prayer book's repent page flared, its light a fragile beacon in the crimson-streaked gloom. Lena's breath came in shallow gasps as the guardian's shadow swelled, its ember eyes piercing the transept from the vault below, its presence a suffocating force that bent the air. The journal slipped, a page fluttering open to reveal a sketch of Miriam Carver, her blood dripping into the chalice, and a final entry, the saint's blood judges the unworthy, the vessel must face the trial. The words sank into her, and the inscription burned hotter, tendrils piercing her heart, dragging her into a vision of Vatican tribunal, robed figures chanting, Miriam bound as the cardinal pronounced judgment, her blood sealing the curse into the relic. The vision shattered as the transept's floor split, a chasm opening where the vault had been, and the guardian rose fully, its form a grotesque fusion of saint and demon wings of decayed flesh, a halo cracked and bleeding, its voice a chorus of damned souls. The trial begins, it intoned, its wings beating a gust that knocked Lena back. The prayer book flew from her jacket, landing open on the repent page, and the air thickened with myrrh, the scent a prelude to judgment. Spectral figures materialized, jurors in Vatican robes, their faces obscured, their chants a relentless dirge that filled the space. Lena scrambled to her feet, the shard and key falling from her pockets, and the guardian gestured, the chasm glowing with a golden light that mirrored the chalice's pulse. The jurors advanced, their hands outstretched, and Lena felt a pull at her soul, her sins real and inherited parading before her, childhood theft, a lie that cost a friend, Miriam's defiance echoing her own. The inscription flared, projecting her memories as holographic accusations, and the guardian's voice boomed, confess, or be consumed. Jamal stirred, his eyes glowing with Miriam's presence, whispering, resist. Panic surged, but Lena seized the prayer book, its page glowing brighter, and read aloud the Latin it revealed, Sanguis Sanctus, Judica me, holy blood, judge me. The words trembled on her lips, and the guardian paused, its halo flickering. The jurors' chants faltered, and the chasm's light dimmed, but the trial wasn't over. The guardian thrust a clawed hand toward her, and a mirror formed in the air, reflecting not her face but Miriam's, her eyes pleading yet accusing. Your blood is mine, the guardian hissed, and the mirror cracked, shards embedding in Lena's arms, each cut a judgment. She dropped the book, grabbing the shard, and plunged it into the mirror's base. The glass shattered, releasing a wail that shook the transept, and the jurors dissolved into smoke, their chants silenced. But the guardian loomed larger, its wings spreading to block the light, and the inscription burned, tendrils merging with the mirror's remnants, binding her to the trial. Jamal lunged, his claws raking the guardian's wing, and the entity recoiled, its roar shaking the cathedral. The chasm pulsed, offering escape, or damnation, and Lena felt her will fraying, the curse's judgment weighing her soul. With a desperate cry, she thrust the key into the chasm's edge, twisting it as the shard had the vault. The transept quaked, the guardian's form splitting, its halo falling into the void. The inscription slowed, but the mirror shards in her arms glowed, whispering Latin prayers, her ancestors' final words. The cathedral stilled, the guardian's shadow fading, but its voice lingered, the judgment is yours to bear. The chasm sealed, leaving Lena and Jamal alone, the prayer book's page now blank, a testament to an unfinished trial. The blizzard raged outside, the cathedral a prison of her bloodline's legacy, and Lena knew the saint's judgment was only the beginning. If this trial left you questioning, why not drop a comment with your take on Lena's fate? Chapter 11, Rise of the Shadow Choir. The transept stood eerily still, the sealed chasm a silent wound in the stone floor where the guardian's shadow had fractured, its parting words, "The judgment is yours to bear," lingering like a curse etched into the air. It was 2:54 p.m. on Tuesday, October 7, 2025, in the warped heart of St. Augustine's Cathedral, where the blizzard's fury outside rattled the stained glass remnants, their crimson streaks casting a hellish glow. Lena Carver knelt, the mirror shards embedded in her arms pulsing with Latin whispers Miriam's final prayers, while the Sanguis Hereditatis inscription blazed across her chest, its tendrils a fiery lattice tightening with each breath. Jamal lay beside her, his burns a dull ember, his chest rising shallowly, the ghost of Miriam's presence a faint shimmer in his eyes. The prayer book, its repent page now blank, rested in her lap, a mocking relic of the unfinished trial. Lena's hands shook as she pried a shard from her arm, the Latin fading into silence, but the pain lingered, a reminder of the guardian's judgment. The cathedral's hum resumed, low and resonant, vibrating through the transept's cracked columns, and the air thickened with myrrh, a suffocating shroud that clung to her skin. She staggered to her feet, the rusted key and wax metal shard heavy in her pockets, when a chorus of voices erupted from the shadows, not the spectral jurors, but a deeper, more primal chant, rising from the chasm's depths. The stained glass shattered anew, raining crimson droplets that hissed as they struck the floor, and the transept walls pulsed, as if alive. From the chasm, shadows coalesced, not into the guardian's form but into a choir of cloaked figures, their faces hidden beneath hoods, their mouths open in a silent scream that reverberated through Lena's skull. Their vestments were tattered, stained with blood and wax, and their hands clawed and skeletal clutched hymnals that glowed with golden script. The chant grew louder, a dissonant harmony that shook the pews, and Lena felt the inscription burn, tendrils extending toward the shadows as if drawn to their song. Jamal stirred, his voice joining the choir, a hollow echo of Miriam's defiance, and his burns flared, spreading across his torso. "Stop!" Lena shouted, her voice cracking, and she lunged for the prayer book, its blank page glowing faintly. The shadows turned as one, their hidden eyes fixing on her, and the chant shifted, weaving her name into its rhythm. Lena Carver, a litany of accusation. The transept quaked, the floor splitting further, and the choir advanced, their hymnals opening to reveal pages of writhing text that mirrored the inscription on her skin. Panic seized her as the shadows closed in, their claws grazing her jacket, and a vision flashed: a Vatican crypt, the choir sealing the guardian with Miriam's blood, their song a binding spell now unraveling. She thrust the prayer book toward them, its glow intensifying, and read the Latin that bled onto the page: Silentium Sanctorum, silence of the saints. The chant faltered, the shadows recoiling, but the book's light dimmed, its power waning. Jamal rose, his body a puppet to the choir, his claws raking the air toward Lena. She dodged, the shard falling from her pocket, and grabbed it, pressing it against the prayer book. The golden script flared, sealing the page with a burst of light that drove the shadows back, their screams a cacophony of rage. But the respite was brief. The chasm pulsed, and the guardian's voice boomed from below: "The choir sings your doom." The shadows regrouped, their hymnals merging into a single tome that floated above the chasm, its pages flapping wildly. The inscription on Lena's chest burned, tendrils piercing her heart, and she felt her will erode, the curse's song sinking with the choir. Jamal lunged again, his claws catching her shoulder, and she stumbled, the prayer book slipping. The tome's light intensified, projecting a vision of Chicago ablaze, the cathedral as its epicenter, her bloodline the fuel. With a desperate cry, Lena seized the key, jamming it into the tome's binding. The transept shuddered, the choir's chant breaking into discord, and the tome shattered, its pages scattering into the void. The shadows wailed, dissolving into mist, but Jamal collapsed, his burns fading, his breath a faint rasp. The guardian's laughter echoed, and the chasm widened, its depths a maw of shadow and song. The inscription slowed, but the prayer book's page remained sealed, a fragile shield against the rising tide. The blizzard roared outside, the cathedral a crucible, and Lena knew the choir's rise was the guardian's next move, her blood its instrument. If this choir sent a shiver down your spine, why not give this video a thumbs up? Chapter 12, Battle Against the Holy Abyss. The transept quivered under the chasm's widening maw, its depths a swirling abyss of shadow and song, the guardian's laughter a jagged echo that clawed at Lena Carver's sanity. It was 2:55 p.m. on Tuesday, October 7, 2025, in the distorted heart of St. Augustine's Cathedral, where the blizzard's rage outside battered the fractured walls, its icy breath seeping through the crimson-streaked gloom. The Sanguis Hereditatis inscription blazed across Lena's chest, its tendrils a searing web piercing her heart, synchronized with the faint pulse of the vanished chalice. The prayer book's sealed Silentium Sanctorum page glowed weakly in her hands, the rusted key and wax metal shard heavy in her pockets, while Jamal lay motionless, his burns a dull ember, the choir's influence ebbing but not gone. Lena's arms ached from the mirror shard's lingering cuts, their Latin whispers a constant murmur beneath her skin, as she faced the chasm's edge. The guardian's shadow loomed below, its tattered wings beating a gust that whipped her hair, its ember eyes glaring up through the void. The transept's columns cracked, the crystalline residue from the walls shattering into a rain of red glass, and the air thickened with myrrh, a suffocating veil that blurred her vision. The cathedral's hum rose to a roar, and the chasm pulsed, spitting tendrils of shadow that lashed at her boots, pulling her toward the abyss. "Stand, vessel," the guardian's voice boomed, a chorus of damned souls that shook the pews into splinters. Lena clutched the prayer book, its light flickering, and shouted, "I won't be your pawn." The guardian laughed, its wings spreading to reveal a maw of jagged teeth, and the chasm erupted, unleashing a torrent of spectral hands clawed, translucent, and chanting in Latin. They seized Jamal, dragging him toward the edge, his weak cry a knife in Lena's gut. She lunged, grabbing his arm, the inscription burning as the hands clawed at her legs. The prayer book flared, and Lena pressed the shard against its page, the Silentium Sanctorum rune igniting. The hands recoiled, their chants breaking into discord, but the guardian's maw widened, swallowing the light. Lena jammed the key into a rune-carved crack in the chasm's rim, twisting with a desperate heave. The transept quaked, the floor splitting further, and a hidden compartment burst open, revealing a vial of consecrated oil, its seal bearing the Carver crest. The guardian roared, its tendrils tightening, and Lena smashed the vial against the chasm, the oil sizzling as it met the shadow. A blinding flash erupted, the oil igniting into a holy fire that seared the spectral hands, driving them back into the abyss. Jamal slipped from her grasp, tumbling toward the edge, but Lena dove, catching his wrist, her shoulder slamming into the stone. The fire spread, illuminating the guardian's form, a grotesque saint with a halo of thorns, its flesh peeling to reveal a demonic core. The inscription on her chest pulsed, tendrils merging with the fire, and Lena felt her blood ignite, a searing pain that fused her to the battle. She thrust the prayer book into the flames, its page unraveling into a barrier of light that held the guardian at bay. The chasm shuddered, the oil burning through its edges, and the guardian's roar turned to a wail as its wings disintegrated. But the victory was fleeting. The fire consumed the vial's remnants, and the light dimmed, the guardian's core pulsing stronger. Jamal's burns flared, his body arching as Miriam's ghost surged forth, her eyes locking with Lena's. "End it," she whispered, her voice a plea and a command. Lena hesitated, the shard trembling in her hand, then plunged it into the chasm's heart where the guardian's core glowed. The transept exploded in light, the guardian's wail shaking the cathedral to its foundations, and the chasm sealed with a thunderous crack. The fire died, leaving Lena and Jamal sprawled amid the rubble, the inscription fading but still etched in her skin. The guardian's presence lingered, a whisper in the void, "The abyss holds more." The blizzard raged outside, the cathedral a scarred battlefield, and Lena knew the holy war was far from over, her blood still tied to the unseen. If this battle gripped you, why not hit that like button to keep the story alive? Chapter 13, The Accuser's Rotten Return. The transept lay in ruins, the sealed chasm a jagged scar beneath a haze of dissipating holy fire, its last embers flickering out as the guardian's whisper, "The abyss holds more," faded into the cathedral's oppressive silence. It was 2:56 p.m. on Tuesday, October 7, 2025, in the warped depths of St. Augustine's Cathedral, where the blizzard's relentless howl outside mingled with the faint, acrid scent of myrrh and scorched stone. Lena Carver slumped against a toppled pew, her chest heaving, the Sanguis Hereditatis inscription a dull glow across her skin, its tendrils receding but leaving a permanent burn. The prayer book, its Silentium Sanctorum page singed but intact, rested in her lap, while the rusted key and wax metal shard lay scattered amid the rubble. Jamal lay beside her, his burns dimmed, his breathing shallow, Miriam's ghost a faint shimmer in his half-open eyes. Lena's arms throbbed from the mirror shard's cuts, their Latin whispers now a muted hum beneath her flesh, as she struggled to process the guardian's defeat or its retreat. The transept's walls, once bleeding, now wept a viscous black tar that pooled at her feet, its surface rippling with each pulse of the chasm below. She reached for the prayer book, its glow of fragile hope, when a wet, dragging sound broke the silence, echoing from the shadows near the altar. Her heart sank as a figure emerged, Jamal, or what remained of him, his body decayed, his skin peeling to reveal blackened muscle, his eyes glowing with Miriam's vengeful stare. "Traitor," Jamal's voice rasped, a duet with Miriam's, his clawed hands flexing as he staggered toward her. The inscription flared, tendrils responding to his presence, and Lena scrambled back, the pew splintering under her weight. The cathedral trembled, the tar pooling into rivulets that snaked toward her, and the prayer book's page glowed, revealing a new line, "The accuser rises from the fallen." The realization hit Jamal's possession wasn't broken, Miriam had claimed him fully, her rage fueling a new threat. Lena grabbed the shard, its edge still warm from the holy fire, and swung it as Jamal lunged, his claws raking her thigh, drawing blood that sizzled on the tar. The inscription burned, tendrils merging with the wound, and a vision flashed, a 19th century pyre, Miriam cursing her bloodline as the cardinal sealed her fate, her spirit vowing retribution. The image faded, leaving Lena gasping, and Jamal's decayed form towered over her, his mouth stretching into a grotesque grin. "Your blood called me back," he hissed, his claws slashing again, forcing her to roll aside, the shard slipping from her grasp. The cathedral's hum intensified, the tar rising into tendrils that lashed at her, and the chasm pulsed, spitting shadow fragments that merged with Jamal's form, amplifying his decay. Lena dove for the key, jamming it into a rune-carved crack in the floor, twisting with a desperate grunt. The transept quaked, a hidden panel sliding open to reveal a vial of blessed salt, its seal cracked but intact. The Guardian's laughter echoed, a taunt from the abyss, and Jamal seized her ankle, his grip a vice of rod, dragging her toward the tar. She kicked free, grabbing the salt vial, and flung its contents at him, the granules sizzling as they struck his decayed flesh. Jamal shrieked, his form recoiling, but Miriam's voice surged, "You cannot erase me." The salt burned a path through the tar, revealing a faint outline of the chalice's imprint beneath. Lena pressed the shard into the imprint, the salt enhancing its glow, and the transept shuddered, the tar receding. Jamal collapsed, his body convulsing, Miriam's ghost rising from him, her eyes blazing with fury. "You'll join me yet," Miriam whispered, her form dissolving into the chasm, but the inscription on Lena's chest pulsed, tendrils anchoring her to the curse. The Guardian's shadow flickered below, its voice a growl, "The accuser is but a herald." The chasm sealed, leaving Jamal's lifeless form, his burns extinguished, a hollow shell. The prayer book's page dimmed, its guidance spent, and Lena knew the battle had shifted. Miriam's return was a prelude to something greater. The blizzard raged outside, the cathedral a mausoleum of her losses, and Lena felt the abyss's pull, her blood its next target. If this accuser's return stunned you, why not subscribe to see what happens next? Chapter 14, Eternal Prayers in the Blizzard. The transept stood as a graveyard of shattered hopes, the chasm seal a fragile scar beneath a veil of black tar that glistened in the dim light, its silence a deceptive calm after Miriam's retreat. It was 2:57 p.m. on Tuesday, October 7, 2025, in the warped sanctum of St. Augustine's Cathedral, where the blizzard's wrath outside battered the fractured walls, its icy fingers seeping through the crimson-streaked gloom. Lena Carver knelt beside Jamal's lifeless form, his extinguished burns a testament to the accuser's departure, the Sanguis Hereditatis inscription a dull ember across her chest, its tendrils a permanent lattice etched into her flesh. The prayer book lay open, its Silentium Sanctorum page scorched and blank, the rusted key and wax metal shards scattered amid the rubble, their power spent. Lena's breath fogged in the frigid air, her thigh wound from Jamal's claws throbbing, the mirror shard's Latin whispers now a faint echo beneath her skin. The Guardian's growl, "The accuser is but a herald," haunted her, and the cathedral's hum resumed, a low vibration that rattled the tar into ripples, signaling the abyss's unrest. She staggered to her feet, the weight of her crew's losses, Sarah, Mike, Elena, and now Jamal, crushing her spirit, yet a resolve hardened within her. The blizzard's howl grew deafening, shaking the stained glass remnants, and the transept's ceiling cracked, snow spilling in to mingle with the tar. A sudden pulse from the chasm drew her gaze, and the tar parted, revealing a faint outline of the chalice, its golden glow pulsing weakly beneath the stone. The inscription flared, tendrils reaching toward the chasm, and Lena felt a pull, her blood answering the relic's call. The guardian's shadow surged upward, its tattered wings reforming, its ember eyes blazing through the void, its voice a thunderous chant, "The vessel completes the rite." The transept quaked, columns collapsing, and spectral hands clawed from the chasm, their Latin prayers a relentless dirge that synced with the inscription's beat. Lena grabbed the shard, its edge still warm, and plunged it into the chasm's seal, twisting with a scream. The stone split, the chalice rising on a tide of crimson, its seal fully cracked, releasing a torrent of saints' blood that splashed across the floor, hissing and steaming. The guardian loomed, its halo of thorns dripping itcher, and the hand seized her, dragging her toward the relic. A vision overwhelmed her: Miriam's execution, the cardinal's betrayal, the guardian's binding, and a final ritual to unseal it with the vessel's blood. The image faded, leaving her gasping, the blood pooling around her knees. She thrust the prayer book into the blood, its page igniting with Sanguis Sanctus, Libero me, holy blood, free me, the words tearing from her throat. The chalice pulsed violently, the blood rising into a vortex, and the guardian roared, its wings disintegrating as the light consumed it. The hands released her, dissolving into mist, but the vortex tightened, pulling the chalice and Lena toward the chasm. She jammed the key into the relic's base, the shard amplifying the glow, and the transept exploded in a blinding flash, the guardian's wail shaking the cathedral to its core. The light faded, the chasm sealing, the chalice gone, its pulse silenced. Lena collapsed, the inscription fading to a scar, the blood evaporating into a whisper of Latin prayers eternal, inescapable echoing in her veins. The cathedral stilled, the blizzard's howl retreating, but the prayers lingered, a curse woven into her bloodline. The stained glass reformed, depicting Miriam's face, her eyes watching, and Lena knew the guardian was banished but not destroyed. Outside, the south side emerged from the storm, unaware of the battle within. Lena stumbled into the snow, the prayer book a charred relic, and felt the prayer's weight a burden she'd carry forever. If this ending left you haunted, why not share it with someone who loves a chilling tale?